When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell a story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our hearts stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Good morning. Welcome to the live in-person and live Zoom worship service of the Universalist Unitarian Church of Riverside. Our opening hymn this morning is number 207, Earth Was Given as a Garden, from the Gray Hymnal. Many of us will recognize the melody of this song. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, and stand and body your spirit, and join us in singing number 207, Earth Was Given as a Garden.
Earth was given as a garden, cradle for humanity, tree of life and tree of knowledge, placed for our discovery. Here was home for all your creatures, born of land and sky and sea, all created in your image, all to live in harmony. Show to us again the garden where all life flows fresh and free. Gently guide your sons and daughters into full maturity. Teach us how to trust each other, how to use for good our power, how to touch the earth with reverence, then once more will Eden flower. Bless the earth and all your children, one creation make us whole, interwoven, all connected, planet-wide and inmost soul. Holy Mother, life bestowing, bid our waste and warfare cease. Fill us all with grace o'erflowing. Teach us how to live in peace.
Thank you for joining us here in person, and thank you for joining us remotely by Zoom, where we will continue live streaming and posting these services on our YouTube channel for our virtual attendees. I'm Grace Preuss, a member of the Worship Committee, and I will be your worship associate today. Other members of the Worship Committee who make this service possible include Alec Peck, our music coordinator, Adam Wedeking, who monitors our visual and online connections, and Kate Lewicki, who is in charge of our sound system. We welcome you to join us this morning with an open mind and an open heart, and with muted electronic devices, please. This is a place where we come to learn more about being human and how we can apply our values to encourage individual and collective growth. Thank you for joining us today. We are glad you are here. March is Women's History Month, an annual observance to highlight the contributions of women to events in history and contemporary society. This year, National Women's History Month celebrates women who advocate for equity, diversity, and inclusion. In celebration of this month, we will continue last week's theme of Women in Science with today's presentation on great women of the scientific revolution. It is worth noting that both of these presentations were written by two scientists who are members of our congregation, Alec Peck, a physicist, and Lee Greer, an evolutionary biologist. Both Alec and Lee have firsthand knowledge of the rigor and discipline required in the scientific field, regardless of gender or background. We appreciate their insight and participation. Before we move into the service, there are a few announcements we would like to share. We will mention several websites, email addresses, and phone numbers. At the end of the service, we will leave up a slide with all of this information, and it is also available on our website. Our lunch series continues with the St. Patrick's Day Luncheon on March 16th at 1:30 p.m. There will be good food and good fellowship. Suggested donations are $25 per person or sweat equity, $12 for children's ages 6 to 12, and free for ages 5 and under. This event is advance purchase only, and all proceeds will go to the church fund. Pledge Luncheon. Our annual pledge drive is right around the corner. On Sunday, March 24th, after the service, there will be a discussion about our goals for next year, followed by lunch. Please RSVP by email to admin@uuchurchofriverside.org by Thursday, March 21st, or by phone to 951-686-6515. Please look for an email with information about this pledge luncheon. And now I invite you to sit back and take a slow, deep breath as we move into the worship hour. You are welcome to read with me our covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. and service is its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to live in service to humankind and all life in fellowship. Thus do we covenant. Today, our speaker will be UUCR member Lee Greer, who will be joining us by Zoom. Lee Greer is an evolutionary biologist, educator, who is married to Linda and a father of 3. Lee and Linda have been members of the UU Church of Riverside for years. Today, we will review the history of select paradigm-shaking women scientists and the obstacles they face and overcome, as well as their contributions to free thought and the making and breaking of worldviews. We have 2 lightings of sacred flames. The first is the occupied Indigenous Peoples Remembrance Candle. The second is the lighting of our own chalice, the symbol of our faith. We walk upon the traditional territories of diverse and sovereign peoples, the original people of this land, who continue to cry out for justice and self-determination. This spot we occupy was first a sacred space of several groups of Indigenous peoples, including the Cahuilla, the Cupeño, and the Serrano. We, the Universalist Unitarian Church of Riverside, light this sacred flame as the stewards of this sacred and holy place. We are blessed with a space and opportunity to strive to live out our common principles, to bring justice, equity, and compassion into our daily lives, to resist all that threatens the earth and her people, and to be part of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Let these thoughts carry us forth as we journey and worship together. Today's reading for the chalice lighting is Counsels by Marge Piercy. This is a responsive reading, and I invite you to read aloud with me the bold italicized lines projected on the slide. Thank you, Bill. We must sit down and reason together. In the dark, we could propose and describe and suggest. No one would speak more than twice. No one would speak less than once. Perhaps we could begin to listen. The women must learn to say, I think this is so. After each speaks, she or he will say a ritual phrase. Thank you. Amen. We have a tradition at UUCR to welcome those who are visitors or perhaps returning after some time away. We know it can be uncomfortable to stand up and speak in front of others, and so I will now ask for a volunteer for someone who has been here a while to tell us your name and how you found out about our church. We ask you to step close to the mic, speak into it directly and clearly so that everyone can hear. Please be aware that you will be visible on our Zoom camera and in the recording of this service, which is posted online. I see a volunteer ready to come up.
My name is Nick, and I'm a Universalist Unitarian. It was a dark and stormy night when first I arrived at this church. My wife and I came for a concert, had no idea what Universalist Unitarianism was. We didn't even know what Unitarian Universalism was.
Now you do.
So, fine concert, kind of a storyteller, Gabriel Keebler or somebody like that. And as we're going out the door, my wife has the audacity to grab a pamphlet saying something about feminists in this church. She was excited by this and the words inside. She said, I'm going to that church this Sunday. You coming with me? I said, no. When I go places like that, I join. I'm not going. So I didn't go for about a month, and she continued to go. This said to me, well, there might be something going on here, and there was, and there still is, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And that was like 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Thank you. That's how you do it. Stand close to the mic.
Thank you, Nick. And that's how it's done. So if you are new here, a visitor, or an old friend, please raise your hand to stand up and come up to the mic. Do we have any visitors today? I think everyone is a familiar face. Yes. Anyone on Zoom, Adam? No? Okay. So for any other new guests, please join us for socializing and coffee hour after the service. We'd love to chat with you out in the parish hall, where you can also find our visitors book. Please leave your name before you leave so that we know you were here, and leave your contact information if you'd like to know about upcoming events. For those online, the best way to get added to the mailing list is to email the church office at admin@uuchurchofriverside.org. Our hymn now is Holy Now by Peter Mayer. The words will be projected on the slide. Please feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, or just sit back and enjoy the music. Stand in body or spirit and join us in singing Holy Now.
When I was a boy, each week on Sunday we would go to church and pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. And when I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two, and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad, miracles don't happen still. Now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even better magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips, but now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, is holy now. Questioning child's face, say it's not a testament. That'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come, say it's not a sacrament. I tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood, I saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush and singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now.
Thank you, Tinka. This portion of our service is to support our beloved historical church. This can be accomplished in several ways. In addition to the weekly collection, you may send your checks to the church address, which is shown here. You may contribute by PayPal using the QR code, which is shown here, as well as on the church website and in the newsletter. Stater Brothers Market gives our church a rebate on Stater grocery cards, which we will have in church each Sunday. Amazon gift cards are also available. You get the full value, and the church also receives a percentage for free. Please see Dinah Rowe or Robert Brown in the church office if you are interested in purchasing the gift cards. A bag will also be passed around to collect any food or hygiene items for those in need. Please donate as the Spirit moves you by whatever method works best for you. I think that last sentence was in the wrong place. Thank you for your generosity. And to those who give of their time and their talent, thank you for your generous care and attention. To all of you who have joined us here today, thank you for the gift of your presence. Will our ushers now please come forward to receive the collection? Thank you. Our next hymn is number 402, From You I Receive, from the Gray Hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, and stand and body your spirit and join us in singing number 402, From You I Receive.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
Our meditation today is a silent meditation accompanied by meditation music by Beautiful Planet Music. I invite you all to find a relaxed and comfortable position and take a deep, cleansing breath. Release all mental and physical tension and anxiety, and just allow yourself to be present in the moment. If you wish, gently close your eyes. Now I invite you to slowly bring yourself back to the present as we continue our service. I would now like to introduce Lee Greer, who will be speaking to us on Great Women of the Scientific Revolution. Lee?
Good morning. Can you hear me fine? Testing the microphone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, great. Thank you. All right, I'm going to share a few things here and a few slides, and so here we go. Wait, that. Are you only seeing what's inside the? Let's see. So I'm going to fix that by making a PDF out of this, because I don't think you are seeing my full screen. So I will fix
I
that.
think you're seeing it.
I suspect you're not, because when I go full screen, I don't think you're seeing the bottom of the screen. But just let me, if you don't mind me checking, and then I'll be sure that that's what's happening. So if we're starting from the current slide, do you see the bottom of the screen, March 10 and Universalist Unitarian Church written in tiny script at the bottom? Do you see
No.
that? Nope. Okay. So that's hence I will Now that I've saved it as a PDF, I will actually switch to that, and that'll be the way we'll go forward. All right, here's screen share. Now you should see the entire screen. Do you see it?
Yes.
Oh, great, perfect. Okay, great. Well, we want to continue this great women of the scientific revolution. And of course, by the scientific revolution, we don't just mean an epoch in the past. We mean something that started in the past and moved. It's commonly dated from the mid-17th, 18th centuries, from the 17th and 18th centuries on up. Since then, of course, there were precursors of it before that. And what a wonderful time that we have to consider this month the contributions of women in all aspects of our lives and here in science. Well, of course, the scientific revolution in many ways began much earlier, back with the Greeks, but that, in fact, and here I'm citing Epicurus, but it goes beyond him back to Thales and so forth. People who began to realize the unity of law governing the universe, and that we're part of this huge system. And of course, within our traditions that give rise to the universalist Unitarian eclectic mix that we are, from the three great Abrahamic religions, there were heretics who saw and equated and observed and thought of and considered the unity of all existence, God and the universe. And of the three Abrahamic religions, the youngest of the religions had one of these heretics first. The Islamic tradition, Ibn al-Arabi, who saw that essential unity, he was regarded as a heretic, actually. Then, of course, Giordano Bruno, who was in the Christian tradition, not only was regarded as a heretic, but actually was burned to death. And then from Judaism, excommunicated Benedict de Spinoza, who also saw the essential unity. And of course, it is that vision which was inherited from the ancient Greeks and recovered that led to the scientific revolution of the 18th, 17th and 18th century, as Sir Isaac Newton, the greatest genius of the last millennium, doubtless, one of the most accomplished, said, if I've seen further than others, is because I've stood upon the shoulders of giants. And there are a few of the giants, many of them in the Greek tradition, but also in the intervening period. Now we turn to two great women in this tradition of the scientific revolution proper, and does not mean that there were not before. There are many honorable mentions. We wouldn't have time to give them all, but one of them that stands out is Hypatia, a mathematician from the early centuries CE of the Common Era in Alexandria. She was a mathematician of the Pythagorean school and also did some innovations of her own. Sadly, she was killed by a rampaging religious mob, happened to be in that case a Christian mob, and so forth. Well, the first one that we want to turn to in the 18th century, when science began, it used to be called natural philosophy a lot, is this remarkable woman who is pictured here with Voltaire, Gabrielle Emily Marquise du Châtelet. All right. And she was a Renaissance woman. She was a physician and a physicist and a biblical critic and a philosopher and an advocate for women's education. She was actually a lover of Voltaire, who repeatedly wrote praising her brilliance as exceeding his own. She was friends with Gottfried Leibniz, who was a co-discoverer of the calculus with Sir Isaac Newton. She translated into French Isaac Newton's work, the Principia Mathematica. She wrote a dissertation on the propagation of fire. She also did a huge work called the Institutions of Physics, Institutions de Physique. And within that, she summarized and clarified a lot of the physics issues within that time, including the notion of the conservation of energy, of the total energy of a system, which of course helped lay the foundation for Emmy Noether, which we talked about, which Alec wrote about last week, when the mathematician physicist who laid out the relation between laws of conservation and symmetries in nature. She also wrote critically on biblical studies in her Examen de la Genèse, of the book of Genesis and of the books of the New Testament, and also on what happiness is in philosophy. She died in her early 40s in childbirth. That was something that happened then, and but she is one of the great, but very often unsung, unrecognized women scientists of the early scientific revolution. We're going to turn next to another one, Barbara McClintock, who was a botanist. She wanted to move in other areas, but her educational possibilities open to her kind of forced her into botany. She is the third from the left of the children of at the bottom. Those are her siblings. They were a musical family. She was born in 1902, died in 1992. And she eventually was awarded the Nobel Prize. She's actually the only one of the three that I will discuss this morning who were fully recognized in, fully recognized belatedly in her case for her achievements. She was not the only one who deserved a Nobel Prize, but she was the one who was awarded it. And it's worth telling a little bit about her story. Now, she was, she got her undergraduate and her graduate degrees in the 1920s. Okay? And she pioneered the use of carmine dye to visualize chromosomes in plants. She was forced into botany, as I mentioned, because prejudice and things that she had to face. Now, by the way, her work there introducing carmine dye to visualize chromosomes, in my own research in the 1990s, I used acetocarmine in my cytogenetic studies in the Chihuahuan Desert and its surrounding area when I was studying the evolution of a group of plants there. And she began publishing a series of papers starting in 1928 where she looked at meiosis. Meiosis is the division of the germline sex cells, eggs and sperm, of course, in plants. In this case, maize, which is the corn, maíz in Spanish. Okay, and she examined the chromosome morphology using those visualization and began to publish on that and documented triploid corn, an extra set of chromosomes there. Between 1930 and 35, she demonstrated crossing over recombination that had occurred during meiosis. Okay, so that was they had already discovered the work of Morgan and others that recombination occurs and that one can establish a linkage map of traits based on that, but they didn't know where cytologically that, or how that occurred. She established that it occurred in chromosomes cytologically, that means by visual inspection by microscope, okay, during meiosis. She also studied genetic linkage in corn, and she began applying what had been discovered earlier, X-rays, which alters genes. Well, they didn't know about genes then, but alters genetic components. And she used that to study cytogenetics, which is simply the field of studying chromosomes within their cytological context in the cell. She went to Germany for a while, returned to Cornell, which wouldn't hire a woman professor. Okay, and mind you, she had already revolutionized the field and hadn't even gotten to her main contributions in the field there. And so they gave her a position. She eventually landed a position at the University of Missouri, okay, because a senior male scientist had invited her there. All right, well, when he moved to Caltech, she realized that she wasn't going to, her position was probably going to be dumped. So she eventually was awarded a position at Cold Springs Harbor Laboratory. Very important institution, later made famous by the presence of Jim Watson there, he of Nobel fame, the guy who with Maurice Wilkins helped steal Rosalind Franklin's work and earned him a Nobel Prize while she was excluded Rosalind Franklin. And that's where things began to really get exciting for her work. Okay, because she began to examine something which had been observed earlier, is that there's some weird coloration which is happening in corn kernels. Okay, what we commonly call Indian corn, this colored corn like that. And it's caused, we know now, by the aileron gene, which is in the outer endosperm layer, which is on the kernels. And it has all these weird colorations that just appear in weird ways and disappear and all of that. And she first very presciently attributed this to mutational instability in the chromosome. Something is not stable on the chromosome. Now remember, they had already mapped genes to chromosomes, genetic traits, Mendelian traits, to chromosomes. And they knew that they could be linked. They knew they could cross over. All of that had been established. Well, she noticed that the aileron trait coloration in corn kernels kept popping on and off in a weird way, and she found the regulator elements of those, which she called dissociation, DS, and activa, that's activa dissociation, and activator gene, and they played off against each other. And she took the wild realization that, in fact, these genes are not stably located on chromosomes and that they jump around. And thus was born the field of transposable elements, what we now call transposons. Okay, and there's all kinds of them. They are genomic hitchhikers, which, well, we'll say more about them. Okay, now, what she found from her colleagues as she kept publishing the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, on up into the 70s, she kept going around and presenting her work, and it was met with puzzlement, even hostility, because it went against certain of the set ideas in the paradigm of the time. Okay, and whoops, let's see what happened here. Just a moment. Something went wrong. I will restart that. Okay, there we are. Let's make sure that I get that back into sharing. Apologies, share screen. There we are. Okay. All right, so she was facing this, and at a certain point, she just quit publishing, actually. She just said, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. And that was in the early 70s. She wrote in 1973, said, over the years, I have found that it is difficult, if not impossible, she said of her male colleagues, to bring the consciousness of another person, the nature of his tacit assumptions, when by some special experiences, I've been made aware of them. This became painfully evident to me in my attempts during the 50s to convince geneticists that the action of genes had to be and was controlled. She was one of the founders, of course, of the whole idea of genetic regulation, its discoverer. It is now equally painful to recognize the fixity of assumptions that many persons hold on the nature of controlling elements in maize and in the manners of their operation. One must await the right time for conceptual change, right? And that's what she had to wait. And the years passed and the years passed. Others began to discover these transposable elements in other organisms, okay? Now we know that about 90% of the maize genome are full of these genomic hitchhikers. 45% of our own genome, and they're found across all organisms, all the branches of the tree of life. We now know that they're central in evolutionary history and in all of that. I'm going to show you, I'm going to go quickly to a spot here. Let's see. There we go. All right, I'm going to share another screen. Well, actually, I'm going to show you one thing more here. Just a second before we switch over. Go. All right. So if we look at the tree of life, okay, and here are a number of the fully sequenced genomes on the right-hand side of your screen of vertebrates. Of course, vertebrates are only a tiny little bit of the huge tree of life. We find these transposable elements, these genomic hitchhikers, many of which are related to viruses, retroviruses, retrotransposons, and so forth, scattered throughout the tree of life, and adding all kinds of interesting complications to the tracing of ancestries and also of understanding the mechanisms of life. Well, what we have here, let's take a moment and look here at, here is the tree of life. Now, these are all the genomes which have been sequenced, fully sequenced among vertebrates, okay? Moving all the way up, of course, into the primates, from the, moving up to the placental mammals. Of course, we passed birds, we passed bony fish, and so forth, all the way up into the placental mammals, and then, of course, the primates. Okay. Now, if we actually take a look at the genome, and here is where any of you can, by the way, all of this is courtesy of your tax dollars. You all own all the data. Okay. Here is a genome browser at UC Santa Cruz. And I just picked a spot this morning. I didn't pick the spot, I picked the chromosome. So let's go to chromosome 2. I narrowed down, and here you find the opening reading frames of various genes. Of course, here is the database of Mendelian inheritance in humans. Okay, and here you find a comparison of all of those genomes that we just looked at. The darker the green, the more conserved. Okay, and you notice that there are little gaps. Now, if we went down to the DNA level, you could actually read this. But here we're just showing you, looking at, and notice that the genes are what show continuity as you go more further remote in time. Notice that every one of these, I could use any creature to be the center of this genome, any creature within the database, but I'm being anthropocentric here. I'm looking at humans and looking back in time across the genomic fossils here. I want you to look down here at all these elements here. Signs, lines, LTRs, all of that stuff right here. Okay. Sign stands for short interspersed nuclear elements. Line, long interspersed nuclear elements. Long terminal repeats. All of these are elements of what Barbara McClintock discovered, and our genome is full of them. And you can tell by when the break appears, when these genomic invaders came into the gene pool. Okay, so for instance, this one right here, which is a short terminal repeat, it's related right there. It only appears in humans. That invaded our genome after we no longer shared a common gene pool with any of the primates or any of the other vertebrates. Here is one, this big interspersed element here, okay? It was in the genome before the ancestors of chimps, humans, and everything had diverged, after the squirrel monkey and the marmoset and ancestors had diverged. And so you can basically trace these all the way back, okay, including some major elements here that are present from the time mammals diverged, and much smaller elements. So in addition to the actual sequence, okay, you can use these elements to trace ancestry. And even though they plopped into our genome, natural selection has appropriated them in various ways to be part of the regulatory process, as well as fighting against them. Why? Because if you've got a whole bunch of these genomic hitchhikers, they can break up genes. So there is a process by which there is an arms race between the genomic hitchhikers and the creatures which are their hosts, us. Here, if we go down to the gene level, you can actually read the gene, and you can go down and see, oh, we're right in the middle of a long, we are centered in right now a long terminal repeat, okay, long terminal repeat, which, guess what, is present, okay, in many of our fellow organisms. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stop there. So that gives you an idea of just how important her discovery is. And yet, is she remembered as probably the greatest biologist of the 20th century as far as the far-reaching influence of what she discovered? Not really. Oh, okay, but they did at least recognize her as her accomplishments in gene regulation and in transposable elements with the Nobel Prize in 1983. All right, let's move to our last example now. And second, I'm going to go back to here. Sorry, just to cut that short. Back to share, and here we are. Okay. All right. So now let's move to another one. Another great scientist, Jocelyn Bell Burnell, an astronomer, radio astronomer, and discoverer of pulsars, very rapidly spinning stars. Well, here she is as a young woman. Here she is just a few years ago. And she did her graduate work later than Barbara McClintock did. She did her graduate work in the 60s. here she is pictured with Martin Hewish, who was her PhD supervisor at Cambridge, and Sir Martin Ryle, both of whom received Nobel Prizes, undeserved Nobel Prizes, actually. Well, partially deserved in the case of Martin Ryle, okay? Or at least it should have been shared in the case of Martin Hewish. Well, she came in as a graduate student and helped to assemble a large interferometer, which is pictured on the side here. Here she is back in the 60s. Here she is as a graduate student. Okay. And she got to be out there. They were using this as a way to observe the sky, use the motion of the Earth as a scanner of the sky every 24 hours to look for various radio objects. Since the early 1940s, radio astronomy had become a thing, and so she was put out there manning those by the hour, well, and by the day, all weather and all that kind of stuff. Well, here she is with Martin Hewish, her PhD supervisor, and she had to go through these long traces where the signal would be converted to an analog and put on this large paper, and there'd be hundreds of feet of these signals, right? And she found a particular signal which was pulsing very rapidly, about 30 times a second, and it was in a particular location in the sky, and she had to find it, had to wait for it to come around again, find it again, make sure it wasn't some sort of artifact, make sure it was recurring and everything, and she showed these results to Martin Hewish. If here is one of the traces there, and there's a pencil lead for scale. So she would have these that she'd have to examine by the hour. Okay. Well, what happened is that finally they established, and then she found another one. Okay. Her PhD advisor's reaction to her was kind of annoyance, as like, okay, there's some problem here. You got to trace this down, figure out what's wrong, and all that kind of stuff. Do it all over again, just keep working, and which of course is the lot of a graduate student. And although it's not necessary to be treated in that way, but nonetheless, she found another one of these, which was even faster than the first one. Well, one day she came into was going down the hall, and wouldn't you know, there was a door which was closed, and she heard some talking going on in there. And she was saying, okay, well, I need to talk to my advisor. Shall I bother him or not? The door cracked open. And there was Martin. There were the two Martins. There was Hewish and Ryle, discussing, well, we've got to publish this, don't we? She was not part of the discussion as to we've got to publish this. They said, oh, well, come here. Belatedly, they called her in. And she of course, should have been part of the discussion of it. And so anyway, it came time to present it at a departmental seminar. Well, this is at Cambridge Cambridge University, which was one of the great hubs of astronomy at the time, that and Caltech over in America. There were other places too, of course. Don't want to be Anglo-American centric there. And of course, who was to give the talk? It was going to be Martin Hewish who was going to give the talk. He already had a big idea. They had carefully kept it under wraps. There hadn't been any discussion, but there was going to be a departmental seminar, and she didn't get to present it. Her advisor presented, and he had his own ideas. He thought, well, this is a white dwarf, it's a carbon star, a sun-massed star that when it burns out of fuel, it leaves a white dwarf. And he felt, oh, these are explosions on the surface of a white dwarf. He had some mechanism going that was there, and he was talking away. And it so happened that that Fred Hoyle, another astrophysicist who was there, actually the most accomplished one within the whole department there at the university, was there. Here he is. He's on the left, pictured with Willie Fowler, who later got the Nobel Prize for Hoyle's discovery. Another interesting story, okay, which should have been shared there as well. Of course, Hoyle was the one that in 1946 had gone on and showed how the heavier elements are formed starting in 46, and then with the two Burbages and Fowler in 1957, and then moving on in papers in the early 60s. They established that the heavier elements are formed in stars and above a certain mass within supernova, okay, in the collapse of those stars. Well, no one had outside of their group had heard of any of this stuff yet. And during the 45-minute talk, as it was describing the results and everything, Fred Hoyle in his Yorkshire accent piped up and said, I have never heard of these things before. Of course, no one had, because it had nothing. But he said, what this looks like is a supernova remnant. He said, and of course, Jocelyn Bell noted that he had, in a 145-minute period, gone from not knowing anything about it to assimilating all the information and realizing the correct interpretation that in fact this was a supernova remnant, a pulsar, what we call a neutron star, today, and it was spinning exceedingly fast after it had thrown off, because angular momentum is conserved. After the supernova had blown everything away, the remnant, super dense, would be spinning very, very fast there. And that ultimately was the true explanation for it. And now, what happened? Well, Martin Hewish was awarded the 1974 Nobel Prize for it. Okay. And Hoyle immediately called out and said, look, the student that actually made the discovery has been ignored in this prize. And of course, Hewish denied, oh no, he denied he was using the work of somebody else, bizarrely, and so forth. And so it was never ultimately acknowledged in the prize itself that pulsars are important and central in the advances in astrophysics and in astronomy, except through her PhD advisor. All right, and later on, of course, when also in the 1983 Nobel Prize, Fred Hoyle was conspicuously passed by, and Fowler, who had done some of the checking of the work, even though the theoretical predictions had come from Hoyle, received the Nobel Prize for this discovery, for the discovery of the synthesis of the heavier elements. Sir Martin Ryle also was awarded a Nobel Prize in the early 70s for his work in astronomy, in radio astronomy, and also that supposedly the radio galaxies showed an evolving universe that was statistically shown to be false, but they jumped on it. So he actually was awarded in part a Nobel Prize for something that turned out not to be true in the 1980s, as further work was done. So I'm going to take just a moment here and let Jocelyn Bell explain in her own words for a couple minutes what the, here we are. I realize I don't, you'll have to hear it secondhand.
It's the remains of a big star that exploded near the end of its life. And this tiny star is spinning. And as it spins, it sweeps a radio wave around the sky. And if it shines in your face, you see pulse, 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 pulse. But if it doesn't shine in your face, you don't see anything.
And there you go. So we are here to acknowledge the unacknowledged, and also recognize something that that a collaborator of mine at UCI said: sometimes science advances one funeral at a time too. All right, so let's return in closing here. Recognize the amazing universe that we are part of, far away into the distance, and the part that women have played, often unacknowledged or inadequately acknowledged in our discovery of it. In closing, let's go to the words of Alexander Pope, widely thought to be a cheery moderate, but he was actually one of the radical Enlightenment group that understood things in a beautiful way, but satirized the other views. Said, all are but parts of one whose stupendous whole, whose body nature is, and God the soul. That change through all, and yet in all the same, great in the earth as in the ethereal frame, warms in the sun, refreshes in the breeze, glows in the stars, and blossoms in the trees, lives through all life, extends through all extent, spreads undivided, operates unspent, breathes in our soul, informs our mortal part, as full as perfect in a hair as heart. And for us as religious freethinkers, what this gives us is freedom, slave to no sect, who takes no private road, but looks through nature up to nature's God. And I thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Lee, for that. We've heard you speak about people that we probably never would have heard of in our education. Hopefully this changes as we progress, and credit is given to everyone that it's due. Our closing hymn is Tongue-Tied by Emily Portman. The words will be projected on the slide. Please feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, or just sit back and enjoy the music. It also says, please stand and body your spirit, whatever you prefer. Just enjoy the music and sing along if you'd like.
Tongue-tied, I am bound to weave my words with thistledown. Sickle moon on the moor turns thistledown silver and fingers raw. I dye thistle thread, red for my mother's tongue. Mother's words made scavenging birds, a wish for a daughter, not 7 sons. Rash words, a shower of stones, drove 7 princes curses from their thrones. Mother's words, the seed of me. Now I'm tongue bound till they are free. I die thistle thread, green for the woods where I make my bed. By the ravens sing, free us of our weary wings. They sing, weave and spin, 7 shirts for raven kings. Bite your tongue, swallow your tears, tongue bound, stitched tongue for 7 years. I die thistle thread, wide for the tears I will not shed. Pale fingers worn red raw, red for the tongue I move no more. Tongue-tied I am bound to weave my words with thistle down. Sickle moon on the moor turns thistle down silver and fingers raw. Tongue-tied I am bound to weave my words with thistle down. Sickle moon on the moor turns thistle down silver and fingers raw. Tongue-tied I am bound to weave my words with thistle down. Sickle moon on the moor turns thistle down silver and fingers raw. Tongue-tied I am bound to weave my words with thistle down. Sickle moon on the moor turns thistle down silver and fingers raw. Tongue-tied I am bound to weave my words with thistle down. Sickle moon on the moor turns thistle down silver and fingers raw. Tongue-tied I am bound to weave my words with thistle down. Sickle moon on the moor turns thistle down silver and fingers raw. Tongue-tied I am bound to weave my words with thistle down. Sickle moon on the moor turns thistle down silver and fingers raw. Thistle down silver and fingers raw. Thistle down silver and fingers raw.
Thank you, Lee, for sharing your valuable time and insights with us this morning. It is sincerely appreciated, and we look forward to seeing you again. We will have 10 to 15 minutes for discussion with Lee, I believe, following the service for those who wish to share your thoughts on today's topic. Please be aware that this will be included on the video that is posted. For the rest of you, you are now welcome to adjourn into the parish hall. Would anyone like to come up and share their thoughts? Maybe you'd like to honor another historical female scientist or anyone in history that you admire. Bill?
Just an acknowledgement right now that slowly we progress. When we saw this and the women from the last service, we had women who were flat getting ripped off by their colleagues. Things that if you work with somebody for year after year after year, and then you go to steal their work, my God, how evil is that? But they're doing it less. At first, it becomes no girls allowed, boys only club. Then it becomes nurture them slowly, they may be useful someday. Then it becomes, dang, that's a good idea. And then it becomes, my friend will be talking about thermonuclear physics and ducks this afternoon. And slowly but surely, we get into the habit of treating people, like humans. You can start racially, you can start battle of the sexes, you can start with science. I really hate how slow the progress has been, but compared to where it was, I see some room for hope.
Yes, definitely.
Lee, I wanted to ask your thoughts. Last week and this week, those of us who are not in research have been discovering how frequent, apparently, or how easily it seems that researchers and scientists take credit or take a greater amount of credit than is due them, and doesn't recognize or allow the other people. So what I'd like to ask is, number one, is that very prevalent? How prevalent is that? The second thing is, what do you think sets the tone for that? I mean, is it because people in that field, in the field of science and academia, have to, the publishing, the recognition, getting a prize or an award is so necessary that they're willing to, bend some ethical rules for that? Or anyway, I'd kind of like to know what your thoughts are on all that.
Well, it certainly is a lot less prevalent than it used to be. There used to be about once we have the internet, once we have, particularly when you have a field that is fields that are advancing very rapidly, like particularly the biosciences are advancing exceedingly rapidly. Billions of papers have been published. It becomes harder to take credit for someone else's work. But this is something that has happened before, and in the case of Jocelyn Bell Burnell, yeah, Alec pointed out in the chat that she is properly cited as the discoverer of pulsars at this year's American Astronomical Society conference, which is excellent. That's wonderful, and so forth. There were deliberate decisions made, and of course we know that the Nobel Prize has been politically given at times before too, and that we already knew that in the Peace Prize realm, which happens in Norway rather than Sweden, right? That the Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize, has been given to warmongers before, but it is less common that, thankfully, the taking of credit from others is less common than it was a century ago. Yes.
Hello. Thank you, Lee, for your presentation today. Very interesting and very well done. You've got me, you spiked my interest in the genetics of autism, which I specialize in by proxy, and it got me really interested in jumping genes and how it works with corn and how maybe this can be applied for humans. Because one thing that they've discovered recently, even though we don't know, there's no real cause for autism, we really don't know the reason. But if you go into genes and you work on that, they just recently discovered that sometimes maybe it's not in the parents at all. It literally is the new generation has a mutation in the gene, that gene causes autism. That it's not brought down hereditary. It's a brand new generation and it starts with the child. That's new science they have. And thank you for presenting this today because I want to apply it to what I've learned in genetics for autism, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, you might look further also in the epigenetics of autism, which is epigenetics is gene expression. And yeah, autism, of course, as I'm sure you recognize, is not one thing. It's a whole spectrum of phenomena and symptoms and everything. But yes, there are some interesting things happen there, and there is the mix of genetics, epigenetics, and environmental nurture factors. Sorry, my cat is just a second here. All right.
Did anyone else have any thoughts they'd like to share? Walt?
I worked in a research lab. It's called soil salinity. And I did notice that, for one thing, researchers are, well, they're what they major in, ultimately what they get a PhD in, they defend very fiercely, and they feel that that region that they worked in is, or what they studied was sufficient for their realm. I actually violated that a little bit because I took both physics and math, and those two disciplines kind of conflict with each other because after all, people are just human and they have their arrogance. And so in my case, I did come up with a couple of minor formulas, nothing at all lofty, but I did come up with a couple of minor algebraic formulas. And because I wasn't a PhD, my boss took great joy in trouncing me roundly. He said, well, for one thing, you aren't authorized to do research. And for another is you can't entirely explain the full mechanism behind these equations. I said, but they work. And actually, you can put them out as a paper where you say a novel solution. And that's code for, I don't know what it is, but hey, it works. Maybe somebody can explain it. But because I wasn't at the proper level, I did get even with him because eventually the other researchers who were more mediocre than my boss, who was actually quite brilliant, they dumped him. And so, but I got to stay on after him. So sometimes when you're mid-level and a helper, you get to stick longer than the bright star who flies and then is dumped by the other mediocre researchers. Thank you.
One of the things that's very important to realize is that most of the discoveries that are made are not made by lone geniuses sitting somewhere, but collaboratively, building on the works of others, all of that. And that is especially recognizable. Well, it's recognizable in all fields of science, that's the way it actually works. And of course, some of the myths we tell in the history of science are actually where a famous name is a magnet to which previous discoveries are assigned. That definitely happens.
I wish that for a while this microphone is not as connected as that. Now this microphone seems to be connected to the receiver, but the screen is not. And I've got 18 years of graduate work in economics, math and technical parts difficult for me, but the 18 years is an indication without a graduate degree. is an indication of my interest more than my ability. I wish that I could have understood you today. I don't know if it's possible to get all the functions, the microphones, and the computer connection into the earphones. But without that, I get less than 50%. And of course, there's a synergy to what percent you get. The higher the percent, the higher squared the understanding. So
I understand. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I certainly, I think all of us would like to see a better meshing of those things. One thing that may be helpful is if you can if you listen to today's service on the internet later, you it should be more accessible sound wise for you. So yeah, certainly our apologies. We do have further work to do as far as optimizing our sound system for those who have trouble hearing. Correct. Thank you.
Any other thoughts, comments today? Okay. Lee, you mentioned something called conceptual change, and that people have to be prepared to make that change. And sometimes it's extremely difficult because beliefs are so entrenched. But the fact that there is such a word means that it is possible. And
Yes.
like Bill Casey said, hopefully we are slowly moving toward being able to adapt to those changes without feeling too threatened. So,
Well,
mhm.
for a scientist, it's important that any biases and preferences one has be expressed in testable hypotheses so they can be dumped and better ones found when the data don't match. As a senior colleague of mine once put it, he aspired to be a one-man wrecking crew of his own hypotheses, so
Maybe we need more of those.
we definitely do. And of course the problem that can sometimes happen, as it did in genetics and as it happens in various fields, is that a particular paradigm which has been very successful can there's a reluctance to leave it because it explains so much, and so we keep tacking on little features onto it, epicycles as they might be called, in order to make it explain more and more, realizing that we're building more and more on assumptions. And then we start to notice when the anomalies start rising in Thomas Kuhn's anatomy, where he discussed how scientific revolutions happen, paradigms or worldviews on the large scale are changed when problems accumulate so much and they can't be explained away or fixed by some new ad hoc feature or some epicycle, that it causes the paradigm to be changed. That certainly happened with jumping genes, and it'll continue to happen because our views are limited, and they're fallible, and there's plenty of things showing that in various fields there are crises developing of conflict between data and models. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it can be really uncomfortable when there's an exception to this wonderful order that we think we've achieved. And then
Yeah.
someone throws a stone in it and says, no, that's actually not how it is. Then we have to start all over again, right?
Yeah, well, we have to, yes, correct. We do have to rebuild, wreck and rebuild.
Or maybe not wreck all of it, but just,
No, not all of it,
Scrap.
no, just
Yeah.
just the parts that don't fit. You must have quit. That wasn't that what the famous line was, if it doesn't fit, you must have quit, right?
okay, so we have
Yes,
one
we
comment
have
online.
Alec has a comment. He's online there.
Hi, hello. Thank you, Lee, for
Yeah,
sharing.
hi.
And thinking about some of the comments and questions, and about how do we end up in this situation where we don't properly attribute, especially in science and especially in physics, where a lot of, especially physicists and mathematicians, we pride ourselves on all these theories being completely objective to humans, and it shouldn't have anything to do with the gender or race or demographics of the experimenter and all that. But I think there is a certain degree of ego among many scientists, and that's partially because our self-worth comes from what we are able to contribute in terms of what kind of ideas can we come up with that solve people's problems. And as you were saying, that science is built on the backs of other people, I think we do inherently recognize that. But because of that, I think it's very natural to then look at other people's work and what if they were able to do something because of an idea that you told them. It's natural to sort of want to think about, oh, what of all this was possible because of me, because of this seed that I started with. Uh, and and then when it comes to then claiming credit for those things, uh, it's not so much a question of a conscious question of who am I willing to take the credit of, although in some cases it clearly is. I think it's more a subconscious case of who do those people feel comfortable taking credit from, and those are of course people who are lower on the social hierarchy.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's exactly right. And of course, thankfully, graduate students, of course, who do most of the work, right? Yeah, with postdocs. All right. Um, they often they are getting more recognition now, much more than they often were in the past, and I very much appreciate that. But there is that temptation to for people to honor the mentor rather than than the person who actually made the discovery and did the hard work to bring it to fruition. Although I am delighted to see, for instance, there's an Alexia Lopez who has discovered some of the very large structures in the distant universe. She's a graduate student in Britain, and they put her and her advisor and university and everything put her front and center. So it's very different. It is not the situation that Jocelyn Bell Burnell had to face, where even when the press asked her questions, they would ask the scientific questions to Martin Hewish, her advisor, and they would ask her the human interest questions, in a demeaning, almost, was she single? What is she, they would ask these kinds of questions as if she felt objectified by that. She said it was horrible, in many ways.
Is there anyone else? If not. Yes, Rob. Oh. Oh, Lee, the question is there any book that you would recommend that would enlighten us more on this topic? Or Alec, whoever,
On the whole topic of women in science, you mean?
is that what you're? Okay, so generally, in general, with what was said today.
Well, yeah, know of what, I mean, certainly there must be many works written on various, I would say take some of the autobiographies of some of these great women, you know, and let them tell you what their experience was, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if there are no further comments, thank you for sharing your thoughts, and thanks again, Lee.
Thank you.
Please join us now in the parish hall for further fellowship.